Hello everyone and welcome to Teaching with Magic, the series where I look at how to use techniques from Walt Disney's amazing Imagineers in your classroom. For today's technique, we're going to be talking about animating with PowerPoint, in particular, the new and powerful Morph tool. This whole series is based on Mickey's 10 Commandments, and the commandment we will be looking at today is Commandment 5, communicating with visual literacy. I love this image from Disneyland and the Jungle Cruise. So much of a story being told here in this one little image, visual literacy. And we're going to look today at how we can do that easily using the Morph tool. So here we go. Before we look at how to do this in your classroom, let's look at how the Imagineers actually do this at Disneyland. I'm going to show you a quick walkthrough of the Sleeping Beauty Castle from Theme Park HD on YouTube. If you want to see a bunch of Disney rides and really cool shots of them, go check out their channel on YouTube. So here is the kind of the ending of the walkthrough of the castle. You can walk through the castle. They have these little animated window panes. These are behind glass. That's why you're seeing a bit of a reflection. And they've got these really cool explosive animations. I'm not going to show you how to do that today. We can do that, not today. What I really want to focus in though is you see the little trees that are moving, just a little bit of kinetics there, just a little bit of energy, just that little bounce up and down to bring a little more life to the image. That's what I'm going to talk about how to do. Real quick and real simple. You can also use the Morph tool that we're going to talk about to do little animations like this, where the prince leans in for his romantic kiss at the end of the movie. Oh, sorry for the spoilers. Real easy to do in PowerPoint. So let's take a look at how to do just that. So communicating with visual literacy means, well, exactly that. You're communicating using visuals instead of language. So I want to look at a few slides from my Christendom PowerPoint presentation I give to my students. This is the opening, and we're looking at the differences between Rome on the left and the Middle Ages on the right. I could have done this in text. I could have told them that, in Rome they had big, beautiful Senate buildings and large apartments and all these wonderful things, and then you fast forward and the buildings are now made out of sticks and straw and things like that. But the visual tells the story just fine. We continue on looking at another one. We talk about the differences in medicine. Again, we talked about how the Romans were able to do eye surgery back in Rome, and then on the other side we showed pictures of an apothecary with all these random herbs and things, and saying that that's the best you could hope for in Christendom. Again, the visuals are telling the story. It's not a lot of motion to this, as you will notice, just a little bit on the eye, and again, the Morph tool can do that. I'll show you a little bit more motion as we go on. Here's another couple comparing law between the two. Again, similar kind of thing. The images are telling the story. So we introduce by talking about that, and then we roll into how the church played the role of the government, essentially, in Christendom, and we focus, here's a couple maps, and then we focus in specifically on this guy, on St. Benedict. And I like telling his story kind of as a comic book. I wanted this to feel like a motion comic. So what I'm going to show you now actually does not use the Morph tool. I made this a long time ago before the Morph tool existed, and I'll show you the animation change that were required, that used to be required to make this stuff happen, but it is so much easier now with the Morph tool. So he kind of breaks out of the stained glass window and he appears in this comic book looking panel, and he shrinks and he moves. That's what the Morph tool allows you to do, and he's going to keep doing that because we're following his story throughout. So as the city of Rome sort of fades off in his history, we see the next stage of his life when he goes and lives in a cave for a while before eventually going on to live in his monastery. So again, all of that is done with some old tools. So I'm going to pop out of the presentation here and show you the actual animation chain that is required to make that happen. So here is that animation chain right here. So this one slide is all of this that you see. Yep, you can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All these different chains, some moving on clicks, some moving together. The yellow ones are motion paths, green ones are entrances, blue ones are emphasis effects. It's just all over the place. And that used to be the way to do it. You see these arrows here. These are the motion paths that he is going to take. Those are really hard to draw and connect to the right spots. So it works, it's doable, but it was so much work. It was one of those things people would ask, well, how'd you do that? Is it just copy mine? It's too much work. But now with the Morph tool, it is so much easier. So I'm going to show you how to use the tool to make something like this without all of this mess. So here we are in PowerPoint. If you want to use the Morph tool, you have to have PowerPoint 2016 or above. which I assume most people have by now. One thing to note, if you have 2016 and you can't find the Morph tool, it's possible you are using a district version of your software. You can see that's what I'm using here. Until recently, my district did not have Morph turned on, even though we had 2016. So if that's a problem, contact your IT people. They can turn it on pretty easily. Morph doesn't require anything special, so we're just going to do a blank presentation. And Morph exists here in the Transitions tab. It's not in Animations, just Transitions. So you just click the little Morph button, and now we have a morphing slide. So what does that mean? Morph does what is called tweening. So you put an object in one place, you move it to another place, and the Morph tool does all the math and magic in between to make it move much more smoothly. So we're going to start off with a standard shape. Let's just put a circle, and we're going to play a little bit of Pong here. So we'll start with our circle on one side. And then with the Morph tool, what you want to do is duplicate your slides. There are other ways to do it. You can duplicate the individual objects, but it's easier if you just duplicate the whole slide. And the way you do that is you right-click and you hit Duplicate Slide. We now have the same slide with the ball in a different spot. If you click on Transitions, you'll notice Morph is still selected because we duplicated that slide. So on the second slide, we're going to simply move the ball where we want it to be at the end of that animation. So we want it to move across the screen. And then I am going to Control D and copy that one more time. And I'm going to have this morph down to the bottom, and we'll kind of have a little bit of a bouncing effect. So then you click back to your original slide, click Play Slideshow, and when you advance the animation, there it is. The ball moves on its own across. I didn't have to do any of that animation. The ball just moves. You can make it so the animations are automatic. So if I change, for example, from on mouse click to after, now when I go back to my original slide and I tap the button, the ball is going to bounce all by itself. There it goes. Much more quick and things like that. You can change the duration to move how fast the ball goes. So if I put the duration up, the ball's going to move a lot slower because it's going to now take 3 seconds for the ball to get across screen. This one's still fast because I haven't changed that duration. So that's the Morph tool in a nutshell. Real simple, real basic, but you can do other things too. You can change the color of the object. So what if we wanted the ball to sort of ping yellow when it hits the wall? Now you'll see that as it's moving, it starts to transition in between those two colors. And then it'll go back to blue. So really cool, really simple effect, very easy to use, and that's what's so cool about it. So let's look at a few ways you could actually use this in your classroom. Just like before, we start with a brand new presentation. You can use backgrounds if you want to, but I would start with blank. I like to do my own thing. So I'm going to start with social studies because that's what I know best, and we social studies people, we love maps. Maps are kind of boring though when they're static. Morph is a great way to bring some energy into your mapping activities. So I am going to start with the map. So let's search for a map. I'm going to be redoing my Revolutionary War unit over the summer. So I'm going to search for Revolutionary War map. I recommend using Bing image search. I'll talk about why in a later video, but whether using Bing, Google, doesn't matter. Just make sure you choose under your images tab. Google, it's slightly different, but I'll show you that. Go to image size. You always want to be working with the largest image possible, especially when you are using things like maps, because you want to be able to make them bigger and highlight. So I'm going to click on extra large and need to find myself a nice big file here. So these numbers here basically tell you how large the file is. Generally, your slides are going to be 720 or 1080 on that second number, so anything above 1080 is pretty good. The bigger the better. Let's just grab this Siege of Yorktown one from Mount Vernon. This looks really cool. So I am going to simply right-click, copy the image, and then I am going to tab back over to my PowerPoint, and I am going to right-click and paste in that image. Maybe not as simple as I thought. There it goes. And over here in the Design tab, Microsoft does some pretty cool new things. Like, for example, they recognize that a full-size image looks a lot better than a half-size image. So you can play around with things like that. All it did was crop it automatically. I'm not going to do that yet. As we will see, we can kind of play around with that. So this is our base slide. We're going to morph around the map. So again, same thing. I'm going to Control D to duplicate the slide. So this is Siege of Yorktown. Of course, if I were showing this slide, I would have some Hamilton playing in the background along with it. You have to, right? So what do we want to highlight? Let's start by highlighting the key. That's not the most exciting thing in the world, but my students frequently ignore it. So we want them to see the key as the main object. So what I do is I simply scale up the slide. Now if you look at the preview window over here, you can see that a lot of the map is now off the slide. That's fine. It just won't show on the screen. But now when I do my morph, oops, which I forgot to click, so transitions, morph, transitions, and morph. Now when I do the animation, and I want to highlight, oh, the key is what we're looking at first. There's our key. And it looks so clean and so nice. You can do this with other effects in PowerPoint. You can use the grow effect, but it gets kind of pixelated. You can see here it's still really sharp, even close up on my little screen, so on a big projector it would look great. So we discussed the key, and we can zoom back out to the full size as it was. You can go from, let's say, okay, there's our key. I'm going to duplicate that slide because I want to go from there directly to whatever my next thing is. And let's say I want to go from there to this. Where do we want to go? Let's go to the actual main battle, sort of in the fort. These little grid lines here tell you where the center of your page is, so I'm going to put that right in the center. And now, if we look at the whole chain, we have our map. We have our focus area, and then it kind of zooms back to where you want to go. It looks so cool. It's so simple and so awesome. Again, you could always do this before, but not like that. So that's social studies, just a quick and easy one, working with a map. What about some of the other subjects? Well, how about math? So with math, I think one of the really cool things you can do, oops, it helps to have a slide. If you're ever wondering how to add a new slide to your PowerPoint, it's just Control M, not N for new, but M on your keyboard, and then you have a new slide. So with math, one of the things that my avid kids struggle with when they are doing math is graphing. They're learning linear equations and things like that. So I'm going to make just a quick little grid here. Another fun tip, if you hold down the Shift key, you will get straight lines in PowerPoint, which is very cool. This outline button right here will make the line a little bit thicker. Let's make it a lot thicker, because these are going to be our graph lines. And, all right, we have our graph. So let's say I wanted to have a point on my graph. We'll use a shape. Let's have a starting point here at -1, -1. Now, one thing to note is that when you present the show, these grid lines will not show up. So if you want the grid lines on there, you have to draw those in yourself as well. So let's just put a couple quickly so we have them. Then I'm just using that same Control-D shortcut to make duplicates of these. And I'm going to draw my vertical lines. You see, this takes a lot of work. Can I just use graph paper? No. This looks cooler. Once it's made and saved, you can remake it. Once you've made one grid, you can use the same grid over and over again. So there's my base slide. And I can make these lines dotted. I can do all sorts of things. So let me go ahead and copy that a couple times, because again, that's how you want the Morph tool to work. Make sure I turn on Morph and Morph. Now what I'm going to do, let's make a simple slope. Let's say we're talking about slope. So I'm going to tell my students on this one that m equals 1 is our slope. So we're going to play around with a slope of m equals 1. Right now we have this little dot as our home dot. Now I'm going to do, so I'm having trouble clicking on this dot. There's a couple different ways you can do that. It's clicking on the line instead. If you just drag around it, it'll do it. But the problem that I'm having is that this line is actually in front of it. I should have put my grid lines first. So you can always just send things to the back. PowerPoint works basically as a stack of papers. So now that those have been sent to the back, I can click on the dot much more easily. There we go. Let me make this a little bigger. Now I have my dot. What do I want my dot to do? Well, if it's a slope, I want it to follow the slope. So I'm going to move to slide 2. And you can decide how you want to do the slope. I'm going to cheat here Watch me cheat. I'm going to delete these two slides that I already made and reduplicate them. That way I don't have to move the grid lines to the back. But we're right back to where we were. Okay, so I have my dot. I want him to follow the slope. So in the second slide, I'm going to have him do his little rise motion first. So in slide 2, I'm going to have him just move up. And then in slide 3, I will have it move to the right. And so now, when I animate my slide, when I morph it, it rises 1, and it runs 1. So now I have shown the actual visualization of the slope very simply in that way. And then you can add, you know, a tracking line of some kind if you want to do that. Let's say I wanted to then build in my slope. I can do that. And this will not morph in because it isn't on the other slide. So this one I do want to animate. I'll just have it fade in. So this time, if I go back to the start, my dot goes 1, my dot goes 2, and then when I click again, there's the line. I didn't draw it very well. I would pull the bottom down over here so it matches up, but you get the basic idea. This works really well with any kind of graphing. It works great with translations and rotations, which my 8th grade accelerated kids really struggle with, but this is a great way to visualize those movements, and it just, again, it looks super clean. So now what about ELA? What about English? Let's go to File, New, Blank Presentation. I thought what would be kind of cool for English, how about a plot diagram? So when you look at a plot diagram, kids see these all the time. They can get a little uninteresting after looking at the 15th one, but what if we animate it? So transitions, morph tool, just copy it a few times. Let's start with the big one, but then we're going to bring it and zoom it in. So give myself a little bit more canvas. I want to start by growing the size here because I actually want to just start with the exposition thing. And then I'm going to go ahead and delete these again. I'd rather do it after that. So I want it to move from there. Next step, I want to slide over the conflict. I'm going to hold down the shift key when I am moving it because this should, it didn't, it's supposed to hold it, there it goes, holds it on a straight line as I move it left and right. So now I want conflict to be right in the center of my page. Perfect. And then we'll control D that one. On my next one, this time we're going to have rising action. So I'm simply going to move the rising action stuff to the center of the page. I'll scroll down a little bit here. And now you'll see that this time it actually moves it up quite a bit, which will be kind of a cool effect. Might be a good idea to go all the way to the point here. I'm going to shrink things a little. That'll add just a little bit more motion and help that stuff to fit just a little better. I want them to be able to actually read where it says rising action. And then we'll control D, and we'll have our falling action. This time we're dropping it back down. And that should work. And then control D to move it a little further for the resolution. So let's make sure that we have morph set on all these slides. We do. And let's see what that looks like. So we have our general overall sort of chart kids can look at, figure it out. I click exposition, that looks pretty. There we go, we're moving across. We move up for our rising action, we move down for our falling action, and then we move across for our resolution. You can fill this in with images, you can put book pages, could be put in there. You can do all sorts of different things to help with that graph. So let's take a final look at science. In 3, 2, 1. Now for science, I'm going to admit that I'm cheating. I did not make this. I am not Ms. Roberts. I do not teach 6th grade science. This one is actually used as an example from Microsoft in their own Morph tutorial. And it talks about the solar system and the planets. And I don't want to show any of it. I just want to show you what it looks like because this is like a high-end Morph tool that looks super, super cool. So notice it's all very, very visual. That's what we're talking about here, visual literacy. When I click forward, the planets kind of pop into this alignment thing, almost like you can see the timeline going across, and the satellite moved a little bit, and it will continue to move throughout the show. So that looked pretty cool. Now it's going to end up looking almost like a scrolling app on your phone. How about that? Very cool. And when I click now next, it's going to slide Mars over to the left and pop in the next planet. And it just looks incredibly professional. But again, it is all done using just that Morph tool. So if we go in and we look at the animation tab, there's none. There are 0 animations here. All that this is, this entire presentation, you could do this with cell diagrams, you could do this with the rock cycle, the water cycle, you could do all kinds of different things. Is there a rock cycle? That sounds like a thing. You could do this with anything. Science is very visual, there's a lot of graphs, a lot of things, and just by adding the kinetics, it works just so much better. So what I want to do, I'm going to take the morph transition off for just a minute. I'm going to put back fade, which was kind of the go-to transition before, and let's watch the same presentation with just fade turned on. Still looks really good, certainly looks better than bullet points, but when we get to this section, it just becomes a lot of words. And it's very uninteresting, it's very unexciting. But when you have that motion built in, it just gives you that extra touch. So, go play with the Morph tool. I will get into more detailed uses of it as we go along, but make those little images come to life, just like that little Sleeping Beauty castle with a little bit of movement in the trees, a little bit of fire from the dragon, everything just looks so much better. So when you move these planets around just a little bit, you move your maps, you move your graphs, you are buying yourself extra attention from your students. So that is Commandment 5, Communicate with Visual Literacy. I guarantee we will come back to that one over and over again. If you have any comments, questions, anything, please let me know. You can contact me through the website at www.mrroten.com or right here on this YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Teaching with Magic.